well, areas in which we found that those who have joined the program who are from the veterinary sector, where they've found success. So IIE was started 15 years ago. It is an environmental accreditation program for organizations of all types and all sizes. So it is not just a veterinary specific program, but we work with people from a whole range of sectors, from sole traders right up to large multi-site employers. You would have heard that I'm not a vet, but we've had incredible take up in the veterinary sector. And I come from a sustainability background, and so we have been learning from each other in terms of the veterinary sector and the sustainability sector to try and help improve veterinary practice, sustainability in veterinary practice. IIE as a program, which is short for Investors in the Environment, is an environmental management program. And it started out as a business efficiency program. It provides the tools, templates, training, and tailored support to help organizations embed sustainability into their decision-making and their procedures. And to introduce an environmental management system or make continuous improvement by using this system effectively. As part of the programme, all our members, all those participating organisations will measure their carbon footprint increasingly, and they use that data to look at their own sort of heat map of where their carbon emissions are, to look at, and increasingly they're being asked to report that data through their supply chain or to set their own net zero carbon targets. The programme encourages staff participation in social or environmental projects, which helps to meet some of the wider ESG or CSR, or just being a good business sort of commitments. And as part of the programme, we audit each member's performance, grading them to one of the 3 accreditation levels, be that bronze, silver, or green level. And we celebrate their achievements by means of case studies, cross-sector sort of knowledge sharing best practice, and promoting their achievements. And we have an annual awards event. So I mentioned we'd had incredible take up in the veterinary sector. This is just a selection of some of our members here, but we have about, I think there's over 100 of our members are from the veterinary sector now. So it's been incredible. I think it started as I don't know. I think it's just because the flexibility of the program and that people can make sort of stepped progress, and it's an easy program to follow for those who, just to address something that Kira said, that often the people who are main points of contact in a veterinary practice, they're not sustainability experts. They are people who want to do the right thing and they don't know where to start, and they don't know what to do first. And I think IIE provides that sort of structure. So we work with membership organisations. There are practices on there, people in the suppliers to the veterinary sector, and we also work alongside the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons to align what we're asking for with their professional standards, so that we are asking for similar things and not making people chase hair in different directions. I don't think you need to know. You're here at a sustainability sort of event, but obviously humans are having an incredible impact on the environment, not only in the way that we are sort of polluting the air, but also in what we're putting into water, how we're overusing resources, and the impact that is having on nature. So we need to do something about it. And sometimes you feel a bit powerless at an individual level, and we sort of know something's happening up at a government level, but it seems very slow. And I think organizations who embrace sustainability, it's fantastic, because you can really feel like you're contributing something that's making a difference as an individual, and there can be real change generated. So it's an exciting thing to do, but not just sort of, if for those who have bosses who are not convinced that it's the right thing to do and want to do it purely based on that, there are a number of other business benefits to improving a practice's sustainability. As I mentioned at the beginning, IIE started out as a business efficiency program. If you are monitoring and measuring your resource use, it means you have a much better grasp on what you're using and how you're using it. And invariably, that leads to cutting costs. It also, in many cases, will lead to you cutting carbon, which is becoming something that's you're being increasingly measured by. It also enhances your organization's reputation and adds marketing value. The sort of clients and customers are becoming increasingly aware of, certainly they want to look at what an organization is doing before they give it their business in terms of sustainability. And so having this, being able to demonstrate and talk about with robust backup about what an organization is doing is increasingly commercially valuable. With IIE, if that progress is being audited by a third-party organization who are giving a report and a stamp of certification, that adds greater credence. Following a program like IIE will also help ensure that organizations are complying with any environmental legislation or regulation. There's not that much for small organizations, but certainly as you go up, as for bigger organizations, there are increasing reporting requirements and legislative requirements, certainly in the UK. Oh, I meant to say, so we are primarily a UK-based organization, but we do have a couple of members who are Europe-based. So quite a lot of what I talk about is gathered from our UK-based experience. But from what Kira's just said, a lot of the issues and the ways to solve them and the things that you can do they're very translatable. Kira mentioned this a little bit, sort of being a greener organisation now attracts and retains better staff or bright and motivated young staff. There is an organisation in the UK called Business in the Community, and they have done some research and said that graduates now look first at the jobs page of an organisation and then second at the sustainability pages to see what they're doing in terms of improving their environmental performance and looking after their people. So that's another reason for the business chiefs to take a look at, think about what they're doing. It also increases resilience against future trends, including rising costs of fossil fuels and any sort of looking at where resource shortages are coming and other environmental impacts. So I will touch on these. Obviously, you're well aware that the veterinary sector does impact the environment in various different ways. I think added to all of these things, what makes this an amazing area for us to work, sector for us to work with, is that you're all very caring. Your job is the nature of it is a caring sort of role, and you want to do the right thing. And to address something else that Kira said, you might not make the absolute perfect green choice, but doing something is better than doing nothing. So just to talk a little bit about what IIE does, it works on this in continuous improvement sort of structure. It is you plan what you want to do, identify an organization's environmental impacts and set targets and objectives. You then put your action plan together, into place the short-term, medium-term, long-term sort of activities that are going to help you to achieve your targets. You check to see how your results, what impact your activity has had. And then you might act to adjust the plans, evaluate the results, report what successes you've had, and then adapt your plans so that for greater success in the future. as I'm about to give you the stages of what the program asks organizations who are participating in it to do, but this is the basis of what any organization should do that's trying to manage its environmental impact. So even if after this you don't come and sign straight up to our investors in the environment, do take a snapshot of this slide, or maybe they'll be shared afterwards, as it gives quite a good pathway what are good steps to take to improve a practice or the environmental management of any organization. So as Kira mentioned this a bit, she has I think she was the green leader, really, it sounded like, but they do have get a team together as well who are drawn from across the practice. And this is ideal because you'll get different perspectives. People have different skills. Somebody might not be very motivated by going and improving the outside space to make it more nature friendly, but they might love the data. So you can play to people's skills, and also they will have different kind of groups or friendships or within the organization, and so they can be good communicators as well. Adopting an environmental policy or sustainability policy demonstrates senior management support, and it is something that sort of can help to influence the culture within an organization. It's something that all staff should know about, and it should be promoted. It shouldn't be filed away on a shelf, a dusty shelf in the archive. It should be very much front and center of what part of your induction process, and it should be on the company website. So to get going on the environmental improvement, you want to establish your baseline. So what resources are you using at present? Usually, excuse me, in IIE, we start with a sort of graded, getting people to get to grips with how much energy they're using at first, and perhaps their water use. Anesthetic gases is a key area for the veterinary sector. It's not only because it's quite expensive, but also it's an area of high carbon impact or carbon emission impact. And so establishing your baseline to know where you are, and then starting to, and if you can't get actual data, so say if it's difficult to read your meters, and working at first from bills until you can nag your supplier so you can get more accurate data from your meters is that's good. You start somewhere and you make an improvement. So setting improvement targets and then creating action plans are very much tied together. So you want to kind of some of these objectives, these targets might be things like procedural change. So they might be adopting lower flow anesthesia, or they might be much more sort of data related. So they might be achieve a 2% reduction in our energy use over the year. So ideally they'd be SMART targets, and you then create your action plans, which will help you to achieve those targets. It's difficult sometimes to measure what the impact of, say, a communication campaign amongst staff about how they're going, switching the lights off, how much energy that is going to save. But if you're making sort of bigger investments, such as replacing old machines with more efficient ones, you should be able to do a bit of a calculation about what savings that investment will bring, both financially and in terms of sort of carbon or electricity use or another measure. Improving waste management is another key area for, particularly for vets, actually, because getting your waste management wrong is very expensive, or certainly in the UK anyway. So getting normal domestic waste in the clinical bins is something to be avoided. So making sure that your waste management is robust, that people know what they're meant to be doing, and that there are regular checks in place is certainly something that is one of the basics of kind of that you want to get right. But of course, we want to go up the waste management sort of hierarchy, which Kira actually had a sort of picture of. So you want to be looking at where you can reduce, avoid waste altogether or avoid use altogether. For example, that might involve taking out some single-use items where they're not needed. So a good example of this is about the use of single-use gloves, which sometimes are definitely needed, but they're sometimes not needed. And sometimes it's good to develop a policy so that staff know when they are needed and when they're not needed, or when they're expected to wear them and when they're not. So thinking about these things is important. And again, you can't do it all at once, but you can take certain things and then make changes and embed that behavior and then move on to the next thing. Reusables have already been touched upon, but looking at items for reuse that can be swapped, single-use items that can be swapped out for reusables is another great way to save waste, and should often will save money too. So there was something that came up for discussion earlier. Now, procurement is so important in sustainability. It's something that often people don't think about until much later on, and when they're getting to grips with things. But they will be doing it now already, because what you buy, it can have your purchasing decisions can have such an impact on your environmental performance. Often it's linked with waste management, because you can, if by honing procurement, you can reduce waste at the other end. You want to look at your bin and see where there are opportunities for saving waste. We've already talked about where you might swap changing single-use items for reusable ones. But also another good example is actually just looking at how much packaging you are dealing with, whether that packaging is recyclable or not, and whether actually it could come in a reusable packaging. So there are suppliers in the UK now who are starting to make their deliveries in either rigid boxes or tote bags. I mean, some of them have been doing it for quite a long time, but but you just empty the box, give it back to them at the next delivery, and you're avoiding having even though it's going in, the cardboard can go into recycling, it's better to try and avoid it altogether. So speaking to your suppliers is a really great idea about how they can help you to achieve your environmental aims. Developing a travel plan is something that depends what sort of veterinary practice you are, and sometimes you will have it's harder to control or influence how the staff get to the office, for example, and their staff commute, or particularly how your clients get to the office, compared with if the practice owns its own vehicles and is going out to do is ambulatory and going out to do visits. And obviously, if your organization owns its own vehicles, you can make decisions about, or the business can make decisions about what size vehicle you're using, what fuels what's fueling those vehicles, how often they are upgraded. You can start to influence staff and how they drive. You can start, and getting involved in route planning will also reduce the transport impact. But there are lots of good examples of how, and in fact, again, Kira gave a good example of how you can influence the staff commute, for example, by introducing cycle to work schemes, where you support people to buy their bikes through salary sacrifice, or by buying more environmentally friendly cars to use on their daily commute, or by subsidizing or supporting them to use public transport. Calculating their carbon footprint. Again, this is something that is part of the IIE program, and we provide a calculator for people to use. But there are also free calculators available that can be used. Getting the fullest picture of your carbon footprint takes a lot of work, but it's best to start. You will end up starting with a small but those footprint, but score sort of thing, but those will be for the emissions over which you have most control. When you try and get further down the line, it does get more complicated and you have less control over those emissions. And it's a picture that sort of develops over time, but getting to grips with these closest emissions and those over which you have most influence is important. Right, next one, engaging staff. So doing different activities, looking at how you can get everybody on board is a really important part of the IIE program, and it can also help to your organization to play a role as a good corporate citizen. Communication is another important area. So looking at how you're communicating internally, how you're communicating successes or not such good results, and looking at how you're starting to communicate externally. So Kira also mentioned that they talk about what they're doing on social media, and promoting the good stories, and that's a really important thing for telling your audience, your wider audiences, about what your intentions are and how they can support you to achieve them. So here I was going to rattle through a quick sort of taking experience from some of our IIE members about what they've done to improve their environmental performance in various areas. So some of it is very basic, and I'm sure you'll be doing quite a lot of it already, but it's worth sort of saying and just for completeness. So energy efficiency, obviously upgrading things like light bulbs. When it comes round to it, upgrading old equipment, old inefficient equipment for more modern and more efficient alternatives is a great way to save energy by rotation. And some things are easy to do, and some will require longer investment plans. But it's all part of this sort of mix of what you can do immediately and then what you need to plan for later on. Controlling use, making best use of timers and sensors, and ensuring that staff are on board with what the procedures are. When does the heating go on, when does it go off, and that thermostat levels are sort of agreed and sort of appreciated, I suppose, and not you haven't got somebody changing the thermostat all the time. And only heating very sensibly the places that you need to heat for the times that you need to heat them. There are a range of smart technologies now which allow us in our homes, aren't there, to better control our heating, and they work in a business context too. Laundry is obviously, and hot water use is an area of sort of quite large energy use, and as is drying. So avoiding using the tumble dryer, sort of using natural, hanging things up to dry is much better than using the tumble dryer, and minimizing that use of hot water. So washing at lower temperatures is another way to save energy. We always recommend that people adopt a fabric first approach with their building. So going for, stopping minimizing drafts, insulating buildings, using natural heating and cooling. It doesn't have to be mechanical. It can just be about opening windows or closing them, but trying to keep that things as efficient as possible, and moving. And then next, you might look at installing sort of renewables. If installing renewables is out of your renewable technologies, if that is out of your, if you can't do that because it's not your own building or something like that, then if you can influence what tariff you're on, then moving to a renewable energy tariff is at least a step in the right direction. And then communicating with staff, so letting them know, and I'm thinking around problems. So we have another organisation who they have some staff who like to sit in a hot environment and some who like to sit in a cold environment, and heat rises. So the upstairs of their building is quite hot. So they have some staff, so those staff go and sit upstairs, and those who prefer a cooler environment go and sit downstairs. It works for them, and but it's a good example of some thinking around a problem, perhaps. Transport, I touched on a little bit here, but thinking about how you can minimise the impact and use of transport. So zoning, visits, thinking about deliveries, how or about when things go off for testing, how to minimise those deliveries in and deliveries out. Tackling the commute is always it's hard. It's difficult to get change. People get very entrenched in their habits, and if you're certainly over in the UK, if you're in a rural location, public transport is not good, and it's difficult to create change. But even if you can just get a little bit of change and think creatively, then that is better than everybody driving to work every day in their fossil fueled cars, which we still have quite a lot of in the UK, I have to say. Even adjusting work patterns, sometimes this will work for some people to fit with public transport timetables or incentivizing public transport use. Now I need to look at how we're doing on the time. I think we're still okay, but taking action on waste. We've talked about waste a little bit. So one of the stock control is a really key area in of your sort of medical products and medicines. And making sure that avoiding wastage there is absolutely, is a no-brainer, really. Oh, sorry, flip through there, come back. And then also thinking about how you can design out hard to recycle waste. So items that contain PVC, for example. PVC is not a very nice. It's a useful material, but it's not very nice, and particularly not when it comes to the end of it. Trying to manage it, and when it comes to the end of its use, and trying to avoid that PVC or other materials such as that contain forever chemicals and things is a good idea if you can. So that again, that might involve adjusting, and PP or polypropylene can sometimes be a good alternative for PVC. You can't always avoid it, but trying to make those changes where you can is great. We've talked a little bit about clinical equipment, where you can surgical and clinical equipment. I'm sure Kat will mention more of these short after me. Cloth items I know are going to come up again, but gowns, drapes, hats, masks, similar things. Incontinence pads. One of our IIE members saved over 2 tons of waste in the year, which made a saving of £3,000 by switching to incontinence reusable incontinence pads. So and then looking for repairability and recyclability. I mentioned recyclability, but repairability of machines is another area where you can try and extend product life, reduce waste, make things last longer. Procurement I've talked to a bit. Trying to adjust, so adopting a procurement policy and trying to put procurement decisions through a sustainability filter is a really great idea. And trying to put some weighting into procurement decisions, so that sustainability consideration, sustainability is taken into consideration, is what we encourage our members to do. Again, it can be one of those areas where you don't know what the right decision is, and if it feels like you might not get it absolutely perfect, as I said before, but actually making a change, and then you can always make another change after that, is, try and trust your gut and the evidence if you have it, and to have the confidence to make a change. And if you need to go back on it, so be it, or make another change then. But it is a key area to get right. With all these things, IIE provides the templates and the sort of training about how to put these things into place, and further tips, and we can put people in touch with other people who are making the same decisions. So it's a good way to try and seek this reassurance. And what's amazing is the veterinary sector are very willing to share their experiences and try and help others to make what feels like the right decision. Clinical practice, again, I think Kat will probably pick up on this, but there are lots of areas in which it's becoming increasingly obvious that there is a right sort of way or a better way to advise, to treat animals and to look after them in a veterinary sense. So avoiding knocks as far as possible, using lower flow anesthesia techniques, capturing the anesthetics, and all these sort of things, prescribing only when necessary, being very wary about the use of parasiticides and antimicrobials and antibiotics and things. And talking to clients about it too, because they are they want to protect their pet, but actually if they understand that by protecting their pet, overprotecting their pet or unnecessarily protecting their pet, they're actually damaging another part of our vital sort of interconnected web that nature is. I think that they will happily reduce their use, or they will change their habits. So that conversation with clients, I know there's not always enough time, but that's a really important thing to try and introduce into consultations. And encouraging owners to bring back unused medicines. That's another. And greener healthcare plans. I'm sure they're coming up next. Water's another area much underrepresented in the UK. We seem to have a lot of it, and everybody thinks there's masses of it, but actually we're increasingly water scarce. There's lots of ways in which you can introduce efficiency measures, in such as the lower flow, low use flushes and taps, and trigger hoses on trigger controls on hoses, things like that, or might be larger investments. Rainwater harvesting. A couple of our vets have installed, as part of a bigger refurb of their premises, they have installed rainwater harvesting. But crucially, actually, just having a really good protocol for reporting leaks is something that is really leaks and drips, because you can lose so much water just from a dripping tap or a leaking urinal. There are other things too, like using sterilium instead of to reduce water use, and using eco settings on water washing machines, or distilled water from autoclaves and things. So lots of different ways to, and thinking about using less harsh washing powders and things to reduce what's being flushed through into drains. So action on carbon, I sort of mentioned a little bit about how the carbon emissions picture, often for smaller organizations particularly, it sort of develops. You don't do the whole picture at once. It develops over time, but just getting a start on things and chip away at the basics is it's a good place to start, and then developing that picture over time and getting more into these what's called scope 3 emissions. Ideally, as you'll no doubt be aware, but you want to try and reduce emissions as much as possible and really focus activity on that, with offsetting the last proportion, particularly, I think Kat might mention, but see if you're going to keep in line with what international targets are demanding. But that reduction of carbon emissions is really what you want to focus on, rather than offsetting. So protecting nature. So many of our vets, they staff well-being is an important thing. So they and protecting the natural environment is something they really want to do. So they undertake projects that will help to either upgrade their space outside or engage in the local environment by doing some conservation work or something like that. I mentioned about using your influence. You can with your customers, and you can, and even by asking questions of your suppliers, you are using your influence. And communicating with your external audiences, and keep asking questions of others in the sector, and those in your supply chains and your closest stakeholders. So I talked about this being a great sector for having a mine of information, and these are just some of the organisations that we have come across. It was another one I picked up, the website that Kira mentioned earlier, but there's masses of information that can really help you to develop your sustainability knowledge, veterinary sustainability knowledge. And there's a list here of other links. They're mainly, in fact, they're all UK based, those ones, but they also have a range of resources that are free to access. So those are going to be my quick takeaways. Measure and monitor. You can't know what you're doing if you don't measure and then manage. Think about these different, how you can control use through technical upgrades, operational procedures, and then getting your colleagues to adopt different behaviours or make sure that they know what they're meant to be doing. Engaging with your wider stakeholders, and then keeping that circular, that kind of continuous improvement cycle is it's a great way to make progress. Thinking around issues. So a couple of people who've made real progress in this sector, they don't take no for an answer, and it's a good lesson to us all that if you think around things, you can often find the way through. And then try and embed the environment into all thinking across the organisation and decision making. That is it. So I probably haven't left enough time for questions, for which I apologise. But
thank you, Camilla. Yeah, that was just thanks again for this very interesting and practical and inspiring lecture again. There's so much small steps we can take as a veterinary community. So I hope everybody is really inspired. There was one small question. Maybe you can give one ultimate advice for people who are too stubborn to listen. What is your go-to to people who really do not want to listen?
Well, I think sustainability people always say that for the very stubborn, I mean, you have to just keep trying those different ways. So whether if it's not the climate change that will make them change their mind, will they accept nature depletion as being a reason for perhaps changing their opinions, or find places where you can make cost savings if it's about that, and just find what their pressure. Everybody's got something that they're interested in that will make them change. So
exactly,
keep going around.
Thank you very much, Camilla. It was really interesting. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.